paths of the bullets that struck Robert Kennedy, they seemed to point not to Sirhan, but to an assassin directly behind and to the right of the senator. Though the police initially claimed that there were no other guns drawn in the pantry, there was a person directly behind Robert Kennedy, to his right, with a gun drawn. Scott Enyart saw him.
Getting up off the floor, he had his weapon out.
Suspicion directed at Thane Eugene Caesar, an employee of a security service, is not new. It was the central thesis of Ted Chirac's groundbreaking 1973 film documentary, The Second Gun. According to his own testimony, Caesar was a last-minute recruit for duty at the Ambassador that night. He had worked for Ace for less than a week. Caesar has admitted that he had his gun drawn that night, but he says he never fired it. But another witness, journalist Don Schulman, claimed to a radio reporter immediately after the murder that he saw Caesar fire his gun.
I was in the pantryway following the senator. He stopped and shook hands with several people and started to progress again. We were packed in there like sardines. There were lights and cameras and people and a lot of excitement. The senator just finished shaking hands with someone, and another man, I think it was the maitre d', walked up and took his hand. As we were slowly pushed forward, another man stepped out and he shot. Just then the guard who was standing behind Kennedy took out his gun and he fired also. The next thing I knew is that Kennedy was shot 3 times.
Now, how far was Sirhan from Senator Kennedy at the time?
I would say approximately from 3 to 6 feet.
Where was this guard who was firing his gun?
He was standing directly to the side and back of Kennedy.
On what side?
He was standing on the right-hand side.
Now, Don, did you tell this story to any police authorities?
I told the story to several different people, including several police authorities. Right after it happened, I insisted the senator was shot 3 times. I was told by the police...
Which police?
Well, I was told by the FBI that I was told by the FBI, my own news people, that I was mistaken, that I was wrong. The senator was only shot twice.
Now, when you say your own news people, who do you mean?
Well, I was on the air with Jerry Dunphy. Also, I did a tape recording with Jeff Brent. And several people I told. In fact, I also told them that the guard pulled out the gun. And everyone told me that in the confusion, I didn't see what I saw. Well, I didn't see everything that happened that night because of the blinding lights and the people screaming. But the things that I did see, I'm sure about. And that is Kennedy being shot 3 times. The guard definitely pulled out his gun and fired.
Jerry Dunphy once again back at KNXT election headquarters. Don Schulman, one of our KNXT employees, witnessed the shooting that we've been telling you about. Kennedy was walking toward the kitchen. That was his route out of the ballroom. A man stepped out of a crowd and shot Kennedy. Kennedy's bodyguards fired back. The suspect now in custody at the Ambassador Hotel.
And I definitely wouldn't have voted for Bobby Kennedy because he had the same ideas as John did, and I think John sold the country down the road. He gave it to the commies. He gave it to whoever he wanted to. He literally gave it to the minority. He says, "Here, this is you take over. I'm giving it to you. You run the white man. Nobody should be run. I'm not saying that the white should be the slave to the black or the black the slave to the white, but he turned the pendulum too far the other way." I'm not a Democrat.
Oh. Yeah.
So it had nothing to do with that. I was going down there just for the money.
Now, who did you vote for in November?
Wallace.
Pardon me?
George Wallace. The people in Europe, I don't care where you go, hate our guts.
They do?
They hate us. They'd like to stick a knife in our back. And want to know why? Because they're tired of us giving them everything. But they've had it crammed down their throat for so many years. It's just like the black man. The black man now for the last 4 to 8 years has been cramming this integrated idea down our throat, and so you've learned to hate them. And one of these days, at the rate they're going, there's going to be a civil war in this country. It's going to be the white against the black, and the only thing I'd say is the black will never win.
If that bullet which killed Kennedy, that was an inch away from his head, this bullet didn't come from Sirhan. Did not come from Sirhan. Because he never got that close.
He was not an inch away from Kennedy's head. Because he was across the room on this ice thing, and the room, I don't know the dimensions of the room, but he was not an inch away.
Was it possible for Sirhan to get behind you and behind Senator Kennedy and shoot from behind?
No, this was completely impossible, because Sirhan was in front of me, and he didn't have no way to go behind me, to come behind me, to shoot from behind me.
You're sure?
I'm 100% sure, yes. Oh, yes. I had the gun after the second shot. I had his hand with the gun in complete possession.
Did you see any security guards in that kitchen pantry?
There was a security man somewhere behind me. I don't know how far away from me.
On what side?
Somewhere around right on the left side, you know, right behind Kennedy, somewhere around there.
We also know, I've found this in the files recently, that various parts of the hotel were guarded by different guards. Thane Eugene Caesar was one of several guards hired by the hotel through a security. A security had like 8 or 10 guys there that night. And different guards were being very good at their posts and checking people's ID and only letting certain people in. But for whatever reason, the kitchen was constantly unguarded, and one of the Kennedy staffers is complaining to the police in the files about how she had to keep shooing people out of the kitchen. No one was supposed to be there except press people, you know, or, you know, certainly Robert Kennedy and his immediate, you know, attendants. But the person who was charged with guarding the kitchen door was Thane Eugene Caesar. So, I mean, if you wanted to have a guy, you know, in there to make sure Sirhan got into the room, because frankly, if your patsy doesn't get in the pantry, the whole plot is off, right? You know, you got to get him into the pantry, and the only way to do that is to make sure whoever's guarding the room is going to let him in. So I find it really interesting that Thane Eugene Caesar was the guard stationed at the kitchen that night.
When I got to the police station, I noticed I lost my tie, and I figured, well, I figured when I got knocked down, when it got knocked off. Also, when they took me back to the hotel, I went into the kitchen area, and the sheriff was still there. There was 3 or 4 men there. They were looking for bullets, because there was all...
While the circumstantial evidence against Caesar is strong, it should also be mentioned that there are reliable reports of other guns in the pantry. Dr. Philip Melanson is the director of the RFK Assassination Archives at the University of Massachusetts, and he has investigated these reports.
To date, there have been 4 witnesses whose accounts seem credible to me, who have talked about seeing a man in plain clothes with a gun in the pantry. And 3 of those 4 witnesses allege that such a gun was fired in proximity to Kennedy.
Since there were no Secret Service men present in the pantry, these reports have sinister implications.
As Sirhan stepped out and fired at the senator, as he was going down, I saw many guns being pulled out. And one gun was pulled out by a security guard, and it was fired. And that's what I saw.
The first policeman to arrive at the Ambassador Hotel after the shooting was Sergeant Paul Sharaga. As Sharaga moved through the parking lot, he encountered a severely distressed older couple.
I asked them what had happened, and the woman related that her and her husband were outside the embassy room when a young couple in their late teens or early 20s, the girl wearing a polka dot dress, came running by them shouting, "We shot him, we shot him, we killed him." And the older woman asked, "Who did you shoot?" And the young woman said, "Kennedy, we shot him, we killed him." And then the 2 of them ran off just real happy, real joyful.
Shraga took the names and addresses of the couple he remembers as the Bernsteins and immediately put out an all-points bulletin on the 2 people they described. He wrote a report in triplicate with this information and sent it to headquarters. Shraga's APB would soon be canceled over his objections. His reports would vanish.
A couple of weeks later, I went to refer to him for one reason or another, and they were all missing. And I asked one of the day watch sergeants if he knew anything about it, and he stated that 2 SUS men had been there that day and cleaned out all the reports. I called them. They denied that they'd even been there. Then apparently they felt they had to make another report, and they made a false interview report which stated that they interviewed me, and I had retracted my statements about "we shot him" to "they shot him." I never was interviewed. I never contradicted my first 2 statements. but nevertheless, apparently they thought that the reports would not be scrutinized.